Welcome to You Don't Know Ball. Today we are going to be doing team previews for the AFC East. We are going to do a team preview for every NFL team as we approach the season. It is getting closer and closer. August 1st is the first preseason game, the Hall of Fame game between the Bears and Texans. But right now, we're going to start off with the Buffalo Bills. So how this is going to be structured is we're going to kind of take a quick look at free agency, a quick look at the draft, and then kind of just talk about the overall narrative surrounding the team going into this year. So if we look at them from a free agency standpoint, they brought in Chase Claypool, Matt Collins, Curtis Samuel, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and lost Stephon Diggs, probably their biggest number one receiver. They also, as we get into the draft, brought in another receiver. But when you look at what the Bills brought in on free agency compared to what they lost, I mean, I think bringing back Epineza was big, but I don't know, Dobbs. Like, how do you feel about the free agency just in total? I think they lost more than they really gained, and which isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but this Bills team doesn't necessarily feel as strong as it was last year.
No, absolutely not. And I think, again, and that's the biggest thing about the narrative about this team is it's not just Stephon Diggs, but he's a big part of it. Because kind of like the way we saw Josh Allen's development, it was like, right when Stephon came is when really Josh Allen kind of made that ginormous leap. Now, I'm not on the camp, like a lot of people, that it was Stephon Diggs doing purely, kind of in that. That's how Stephon feels himself, clearly, as he's made it, he's verbalized throughout this offseason process. But look, I think the Bills are still going to be a competitive team. I do still think they're going to be a playoff team. But that's really the main narrative this year, aside from just, is this Bills core strong enough? Well, it's also, is Josh Allen that a very, very elite quarterback that a lot of people think he is? I think he is. And I think he's going to prove that this year. But now to your point, Hunter, about the offseason additions, right? Look, all in all, I like what they did through the draft, right? Like, I think they added some good pieces, and I think more than anything, they had a lot of picks and they did a lot of good things with them, filled out a lot of depth, right? But the draft is not, I don't think there's anybody that necessarily this year is going to make a ginormous impact on the team. I think it's going to be more guys that are down the road 2-3 seasons. And like you were saying about the free agent acquisitions, look, Curtis Samuel is a nice addition. Getting Mitch Trubisky back as your backup is a nice addition. But if we're being realistic here, none of these signings, none of these, additions are game changers this year. And so that's the big thing about the narrative, right? Is it's like, are the Bills still going to be that same team that we thought had a chance to win the Super Bowl? Or is it going to be kind of like a retooling process here?
I agree. And before we just get into overall narrative talk, one quick thing about the draft is they add Keon Coleman, right? And he's going to be your number one, I would imagine, here. And they add other players, like I like Dwayne Carter out of Duke. Not bad. But just players that really need to be developed. And when you're drafting at the back of the draft, because your team has been so good, that's the reality. A lot of these players are not going to be the top players. Keon Coleman's good. Cole Bishop, depending on how you feel about him, to play at safety. I do like the Cedric Van Pran pick to kind of replace that center after losing Mitch Morse, after trading away Ryan Bates. So overall in the draft, I don't know if you have anything to add, but it was just kind of like, okay, it was a decent draft. Like, not bad, not great, like.
No, yeah, I think like everything you said, spot on. I think Keon Coleman this year is maybe, I don't want to say going to struggle a bit, but truly throwing him out at X right away, I just don't think we're going to see the best version of Keon Coleman this season. But again, that's why I say he's going to produce down the road. Dwayne Carter, I'm with you on that one. I think the two guys that we in this draft class, so that we have the biggest chance of seeing make like immediate impact like this year, funny enough, it's actually their fourth and fifth round guys, like you just said, Ray Davis, running back out of Kentucky, but then also said Van Pran Granger. I think he's going to actually be an immediate impact starter on this team. Been saying that through the whole process. Kind of whoever got Van Pran was going to get a good starter. I didn't think he was going to fall away to the fifth round, but so that ended up working out for the Bills. But the point is, if your fourth and fifth round guys are the guys who are banking on making immediate impact this year, just maybe it's going to take a little bit longer to retool than maybe some people think for the Bills.
So going into our narrative is basically that, are the Bills at their core strong enough to compete at the high level that they have been these last couple years? And my answer is probably no. They finished out at 11-6 last year. They won their division. Miami was also 11-6. Now, we'll get to Miami, I don't necessarily think they're really the team I'm concerned about. If it's anybody, it's the Jets. If they're healthy, especially with the additions that they made. But with a new OC, I know Joe Brady was kind of there. Maybe midway. I think it was like midway through the season when they made the change, and then losing your number one receiver. I just think for the Bills, they're at a point where they have not been able to get over the hump. So changes have to be made. But if the changes that they make don't work out, I don't want to say that the coach is on the hot seat, that Sean McDermott's on the hot seat. But if these changes don't work, and the changes don't work next year, and the players aren't developing in the way that they should, I feel like real decisions are going to be starting to be made in Buffalo.
It's a great point you're making there, Hunter, because I haven't really thought about it a lot. But truthfully, Sean McDermott is one of those coaches where we have a chance to see, and you know how this goes, where there's a cycle once every, it happens. What happens every year usually for a coach. But when a coach gets hired, they get a part of these cycles where they're a really good coach and they win and they make the playoffs for 4 or 5 years in a row, 6 years in a row, but they just can't get the job done. And as we always like to remind everybody, it's not about getting far. It's not about accomplishing something. The only accomplishment from the business perspective is to go win the whole thing, sell that winning merchandise, get that trophy, get that banner, get more people in the stadium, right? There's only one winner. There's 31 losers, right? So the reality is the Bills don't do it soon. Sean McDermott's going to be the next good coach thrown back into the cycle where if you're a team that all you feel like you're missing is the coach, well, all of a sudden Sean McDermott might be your guy. That's all hypothetical. Back to the reality of just now. I think the thing that scares me the most about the Bills, and I think you'd agree with this, is, look, when you lose Stephon Diggs, who was one of the big parts of the offense, you would like to be able to fall back on, well, you know what? It won't matter because Keon Coleman will be able to develop really well this year because our O-line is going to give Josh a lot of time. We have an elite O-line group, and we're not worried about it because the most important part of the team is set. But if you're the Bills, at least for me personally, I don't think you can say that about your O-line at all. I mean, realistically, look, Deion Dawkins is playing good ball, right? But outside of that, we're going to David Edwards, who only played 161 snaps last year. Connor McGovern, starting center, didn't have a good year. Cyrus Torrance, was a rookie. I'm not going to judge him that hard, but didn't have a good rookie year. So we need a big jump this year in the second year. And then on the right side, we got Spencer Brown, who's been playing good ball. But if we feel like realistically we only have 2 spots of the O-line for sure filled, that's not a good situation to be in if you want to be a Super Bowl contending team. That's just the reality.
Yeah, I think with the reasons that they struggled in past playoffs, this just doesn't give me the hype, that they had in those playoff runs. Like this, looking at this team, and I could be wrong, this may be the resurgence they need. It may be the rejuice that they need. But just looking at this Bills team, I wouldn't be surprised if they came in second in the division this year, strictly because of other teams in the division, but also the fact of their team is relatively young. Like they have a lot of guys under 30, which is good, but I just don't feel like, I think they took a step back to take 2 steps forward, which is fine. I just think it's going to be that type of year for the Bills.
No, and I think, you know what? I think history will treat us well on this one. And I'll even say it like this. If it doesn't, I'm fine with it because the Bills, as I would say, I'm always, me, I'm an underdog rooter. So if the Bills end up having a great year, I'm fine being wrong about this one. I hope I'm wrong about it. But I think realistically, we're taking the right approach looking at it.
All right, let's move in to the Miami Dolphins. They also finished 11-6 last year. Our narrative, obviously, for the Dolphins is Tua the franchise quarterback for Miami? I think that's one of the biggest things that's been discussed this year. No deal has really been done yet. If we want to take a look at their free agency, I think the biggest thing we came away with, Dobbs, from free agency and draft is it doesn't feel like they got better. And I feel like so many other teams in the AFC got better. It truly doesn't. And when you look at, they got the Jalen Waddle deal done. OBJ's your wide receiver 3. If you don't got to ask him a ton to do it, if you're not going to ask a ton of him, I think he's a good addition. They signed Aaron Brewer, who's a decent center, but they lost Robert Hunt, who was a pretty good guard. Did the O-line get much better? I mean, did it? I think it probably took a little bit of a step back losing Robert Hunt. You're banking on Neville Gallimore filling the Christian. I don't know. They have decent players on the D-line, but Christian Wilkins is just such a different type of player. Jordan Poyer, Marcus May, good safeties, but overall, I don't know. Like, how do you feel about the free agency?
I think, well, for me, okay, look, as far as free agency went, it's kind of even like you could say, in a sense, perhaps, no, not the same, but similar to the Bills to an extent, right? Like, I think, look, I'm going to say like this. I think getting Jordan Brooks was a really good move, right? Like, I like that move a lot. I think that was a nice move, getting him into this Dolphin system. I think he's going to play really well in this defense, right? Kendall Fuller, I love that move a lot too. And more than anything, like you were saying, a lot of the stuff was kind of just replacing guys that they already lost. And it's kind of guys that are just going to come and fill that same void and play very similar style, which, again, is not a bad thing for the Dolphins because you already were a team that was in the playoffs and it's a competitive team. But I think, to your point, is it enough because we already saw what it was like last year versus the champions? Now, again, I'm not sure. I think the most important thing, like you're pointing out too, is Neville Gallimore. It's nothing against him at all, right? But having to replace Christian Wilkins is a big deal in this defense, how this defense plays. Is he going to be enough? Is he going to make more than anything? Is he going to make a big enough leap this year? I don't know. And back to the O-line, look, Isaiah Wynn has had some really, really good years of his career, and the last couple have been really bad years. And yes, he has the versatility where he can play tackle, he can play guard, which is nice if you're the Dolphins because it's kind of nice, it's nice to have that versatility for a team where there's injuries on that specific group line, all those things. However, having him playing guard off the rip, and then Robert Jones is your other, and then we also have Aaron Brewer on the interior, who had a good year last year, but an inconsistent career, so we don't know what to expect. I think there's more questions than answers about the Dolphins' replacements. But all in all, they're still a competitive team through free agency, and they made sure to retain that. I just don't know, to your point, how much of a leap we made this year. It's more like just replacing who we lost.
And when you start to look at their draft, right, look at Chop Robinson, like I don't mind the Robinson pick. Obviously, they're sticking with the speed element on defense as well. And Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, like they're good. They brought in Shaq Barrett. Like I think he could be a good rotational piece. Calais Campbell as well. He's older, but he still contributes. So their D-line is not bad. Like it's not a bad D-line by any means. It's just like how big of an impact player Christian Wilkins was. I think they maybe replaced it with all these people instead of one player. But then, Patrick Paul, offensive tackle, not bad. Jalen Wright, I like adding to that running back room. And hopefully Mohamed Kamara and Malik Washington can make a difference. But I think this all goes back to the fact of the reality is Tyreek Hill is getting older. The offensive line is not getting better. And Tua is still a question mark. If Tyreek Hill was not on this team, Dobbs, do you think you'd be comfortable giving Tua Tagovailoa a $55 million a year extension?
No, absolutely not. And it's funny because the way you said it, I wasn't even thinking about this at first, but I'll even rephrase to you this. If Tyreek Hill isn't starting on this team, if he was injured, whatever the case was, do we still think of the Dolphins as a Super Bowl contender?
No,
right?
I don't think so.
And I think that's a big thing, is if a receiver can make that big of an yes, he's Tyreek Hill, he's a game changer. But if a receiver can have that much of an impact on how we view the success of an offense as a whole, we have to start asking ourselves some questions on her.
But here's what I will say. We saw,
that's what I thought you were going to say, so that's why it's interesting.
Well, we saw how the Vikings played without Justin Jefferson, and yes, they have good offensive playmakers in a TJ Hawkinson who ended up getting hurt and a Jordan Addison. But I think that they were able to function a lot better without Justin Jefferson and their quarterback than Tua would function without Tyreek Hill. Like, I think Tyreek Hill is such a game changer, but especially for this offense. And I think if Tyreek was not here, I don't know if Tua is putting up nearly as many stats as he did in his time with Tua. Honestly, like, I've really wanted to support Tua, and I don't think he's a bad quarterback, but I think he's propped up by a lot. He strikes me as one of the guys that you don't win because of, you can win with, but we really haven't seen them win much with him, Like, they've been regular season winners, but as soon as they get to the playoffs, they're duds.
No, you're spot on. That's exactly where we're at right now. And that's kind of just where we're at going forward. This is really Tua's year to say, look, I'm gonna have to shut everyone up, or else we're gonna have to have more discussions. That's really all there is to it with the Dolphins this year.
I think the other thing too is the new DC in place. I think they were I don't think the players really liked Fangio. I don't think it was a fit. So I do expect the defense to maybe take a step forward. But at the end of the day, if the offense loses gas in the second half of the season at the start of the playoffs, like they have done the last 2 years, it's just like when you watched that Kansas City game, Tua just looked horrible. Like, I understand it's not the type of weather, but those are like the biggest games of your career.
But I was going to say too, and this is where it gets funny, Hunter, and I'm already ready for some of the comments, whatever. But here's the reality. Like I always remind everybody, I think a lot of people forget the most important thing when it comes to having a franchise quarterback is if they play awesome, right? September through December, right? I think we all love it. That's awesome. But if they can't play January through February, there's no point. Like all those games in September through December don't matter. So I think that's a very important thing to consider going forward here. If you're a Dolphins fan, is if Tua can only play in a dome or when it's super nice outside, I don't think in and of itself we're already in a position where you're already clearly not worth $55 million a year. That's something I want every Dolphins fan to very much consider this whole season.
Yeah. I mean, if Tua is willing to take like 35 a year, 40 a year, which he won't, I just think that's how you can build a contending roster. If you're paying this guy top 5 salary at the position, I don't see it, unfortunately. I just think Tua, what he can do up here doesn't cover for his lack of like physical ability, if that makes sense. Like where it's we see these guys that are super athletic
this far into his career.
Like that's the thing.
Like some games it will, but not when it matters most. You know what I mean?
No. Well, we'll see if Tua is the franchise quarterback this year. Now moving in to the New England Patriots, the team narrative that we have is, will the new Pats regime sink or swim? Obviously, it's not fun to be the quarterback or the head coach after the greatest of all time. I think that you have some pretty lofty expectations, and we saw that with Mac Jones. I think he was kind of set up to fail. I don't think he helped himself very much, but I don't think the Pats did a ton for them as well. But just kind of looking at their free agency, Jacoby Brissett, I would imagine, is probably going to start the season. They, re-sign Ramondre Stevenson. They get Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Reagor, KJ Osborne in that receiver room. I like the Josh Uche re-signing and the Christian Barmore. I think they did what they could to get their defensive line moving in the positive direction. And then bringing back Kyle Duggar, obviously, you'll get Christian Gonzalez back. The O-line, we've talked about this kind of at length, Dobbs. It's kind of a weird situation where it's like, I don't necessarily hate it. They were 4-13 last year, and I just don't know really with this O-line. I'm assuming they're going to want to probably run the ball quite a bit. That's what I'm guessing their offense is going to be. And Cole Strange, yeah. Mike Onwenu, I like him, but the rest is just kind of a question mark for me.
Well, yeah, and like we've already touched on before too, the big thing is besides Mike Onwenu, and Cole Strange, rookie year from last year, did make a jump. So if we can make another big jump this year, let's say we have 2 positions of the line checked off. Now, fine. At center, David Andrews is still a productive, good player as well. But I think, outside of that, and even we've known Andrews has had some stuff going on with, or Jake Andrews, my apologies. Because
David Andrews, the backup, yeah.
David Andrews is the backup at this point. So Jake Andrews is the starter, David Andrews is the backup. My apologies. But either way, that actually plays perfectly into the point I'm trying to make, though, is we for sure as of right now are really only confident in 2 spots to O-line for the Patriots. With the rookie quarterback situation, which is why you have to start Jacoby Brissett this year. If you don't start Jacoby Brissett this year, again, we've already seen what the writing on the wall is going to look like for the Patriots' future. At least you can only worry about having a bad year. You don't have to worry about having a bad future. again, don't throw, hashtag don't throw Drake May into the fire, right? But I think what I want to say is, look, I can understand and see the direction the Patriots are trying to take. And I think that they're doing it. I believe they're going about it the right way, right? Like they're re-signing the guys that they want to be a part of the long-term picture to longer-term deals. They're signing guys that they know they just need for a year or two to these short, cheap 1 or 2 year deals just to fill out the board now. But they understand, look, we're not a competitive team. We're not going to be a competitive team this year. Let's just make sure that we give our team, chance to grow this year, but understand that we're not going to go all the way. We don't need to pile all this money into positions that we don't need to pile it into right now. Let's save some money. Let's make sure we have a vision going forward. And I feel like that's really what you can say about the Patriots right now, right? Is that they're just a team that's molding their vision with this new regime. And we really won't be able to have a firm right idea about this regime until really, yeah, we have an idea at the end of this year. But I think more than anything, you can't even really have a realistic, actual idea of what this team is trying to do until probably the end of next year, because it's going to be a long process. And Patriots fans kind of just have to accept that now. And, it's a good thing, right? It sucks whenever you're going through it, but it's a good thing long term. And that's just kind of where the Patriots are at right now.
So I guess my thing is and we've talked about this going back and forth, kind of moving into the draft. We have Drake May, they bring in Jalen Polk. They also draft Javon Baker as the wide receiver. They go 2 offensive linemen back to back, and then they go Joe Milton and Jaheim Bell at the end. So I guess my thing is, I can buy into what the Patriots are trying to do if Drake May doesn't see the field until like the end of the year. Because offensive coordinator's never called plays before, head coach who's never been a head coach before, GM, this is his first time being a GM. So everyone's on their first go. You have a rookie quarterback who needs to be developed with a shaky line and a very mid receiver room. If you put Drake May out there week 1, I feel like this could be really bad for the Patriots. I can understand the way they want to do things, and I can see it working if Jacoby Brissett starts most of the year. I think that hinges most things, because let's say it takes a while to work out the kinks with this new coaching staff, okay? Let's say it takes a while to kind of develop their rookies that they're playing, not right away, but kind of getting reps. Like, you want to see these players playing well for these coaches. If you start Drake May and he starts playing really bad, yes, there's rookie mistakes. Yes, he's a raw player. Yes, he's very young. I think it elevates the optics of the whole situation. And with the way that Kraft, in my opinion, would probably operate is he wants to win. Like, they have been a winning team for so long. He wants to win. So that's why I'm kind of nervous. I feel like there is a chance that Drake May gets thrown to the fire too early here, and it kind of sets off like a domino effect where it screws up everything.
No, I could totally see that happening too. That is completely on the table. Again, this is just our optimism is for the best for the Patriots. That's also very possible. And I think one last thing I want to include here on the Patriots, while we're still on them, is to your point you were just making about Drake May. My big thing is, look, why I think it's quintessential this year for Jacoby Brissett to make sure that, right, he's in there, he's the starter for the Patriots, to make sure of that for Drake May's future, is because, look, we throw Drake into the fire week 1. We are basically working with, at this point, realistically, the youngest receiving core in the whole league, right? If we take Juju out the picture, which realistically he probably will be for most of the time, we're looking at a receiving core that's going to literally be Pop Douglas, Jalen Polk, and Javon Baker. And I think it's a very big thing where, right, and you could say to me, you could spin this the opposite way. You could be like, Dobbs, you're tripping. You want Drake May to be in there with all the youngins at the same time, because then they're all going to get reported together and they're going to grow together. But I look at it like, right, my thing from the draft process and everything else was, look, Drake May already struggled enough with accuracy, in my opinion. He already struggled enough with getting the ball outside the numbers consistently, in my opinion. I think you throw him in here with all these young guys and they all start bringing each other's confidence down, right? I think that's the worst case scenario, and that's that could very well happen. You force Drake into the fire week 1, and they don't have rapport together yet, and you're trying to force it to happen. I just think that would be the worst case scenario. And I think it's very possible if he gets forced in there, to your point. So Patriots fans, it's long. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I think that's really what you guys should be thinking for this year.
Yeah, Patience is going to be the name of the game. That damn near should have been the narrative. Patience is the name of the game for the New England Patriots.
I love it.
It's got to be hard watching a team win for that long, and then because in reality, the Patriots shouldn't win more than 5 games this year. Like,
and if they can find a way to do it without starting Drake May, and right, I think that's a win. And even if you somehow did start Drake May and they got to that point, even bigger win. But I just think it's a marathon. It's a marathon, right? That's the theme.
Moving into the last team of this video for the AFC East, the New York Jets. Before we get into free agency and the draft quickly, we have them they were 7-10 last year, and the narrative we have is Aaron Rodgers enough to get them over the hump? So quickly, when we look at free agency, they bring in a reliable backup in Tyrod Taylor. They sign Mike Williams, who could be their wide receiver 2 if he stays healthy behind Garrett Williams. They massively overhauled the offensive line, which I think was one of the biggest things of free agency. I think in terms of how good units improved from an offensive line standpoint, the Jets have to be the most improved on the offensive line, which I think was great for Aaron Rodgers and great what they're trying to do. Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, bringing in John Simpson. You also bring in Hassan Reddick, and they signed Javon Kinlaw, or am I tweaking?
No, yeah, they did.
I'm thinking of Javon Hargrave. I was like, he's on the 49ers. So, but anyway, they brought in Chuck Clark as well. They re-signed him. But with that being said, I think the main issues the Jets had last year was wide receiver depth, which I still think they could struggle with a little bit, but I do see them probably making a play for a wide receiver at the deadline if everything is going well. And they massively overhauled the offensive line. So, if healthy, the Jets probably have one of the best O-line units in the league.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, another underrated thing that they really addressed this offseason that you got to love is, look, they said no more questionable backup situations. If worse comes to worse, we at least have Tyrod Taylor, who's shown he can win a game. He can be a productive starter when he needs to step in. I think that's a massive win for the Jets. Obviously, you don't want to be thinking about that being the situation forced, right? The hand that was forced. But if it is, at least you feel a lot better about it this year than you do with Zach Wilson. But I think regardless, the bottom line is if that was to happen again, I think a lot of hopes and dreams are shattered in New York and New Jersey. But at least you have a better contingency plan than last year. At least has to be addressed, right?
Well, unfortunately, if Aaron Rodgers goes down, it just feels like the season's over. People are getting fired. I just feel like Saleh has really underperformed with what he's had. I know Zach Wilson has been his quarterback, but I don't know. It's just really tough. I feel like Breece Hall could have a really big year. But going into the draft, before we get into just, general narrative talk, really, as we talk about insurance plans, drafting Olu for the future to be that future left tackle for you. And then taking Malachi Corley, while I don't necessarily love I guess my thing is, if they don't make a play at the deadline, and Mike Williams is hurt. I know these are all random scenarios, but the reality is, Mike Williams is very injury prone. Malachi Corley is your 2 or Allen Lazard is your 2. I don't love it. I don't love it at all. And we're kind of the Jets don't have this tight end who could act as their wide receiver 2. So gets real thin real fast. I think they're going to make a very, very heavy play for Devontae Adams at the trade deadline. I don't know if you guys follow the Pretty Ricky, the dog insider on Twitter. And I know how this sounds. But he's been on a lot of stuff before it happens. He was saying that the Jets made a big play for him. And yes, that makes me sound really bad because oh my God, you're getting your info from a Twitter dog. But he was on a lot of shit before I was seeing the insider tweet about it. So Pretty Ricky 123 or something like that. But anyway.
I have to address this real quick. I have to address this. Dude, I've been seeing this source all over random pages recently. And I'm like, They have to be getting trolled. Swear that this dude has been on
No,
his
bro.
game, bro.
He'll tweet about shit like months beforehand. And he's not one of those accounts that just like tweets out like a ton of generic information that like could be true and like it just happens to end up being true. Like he'll really only tweet about something if it's like on the move. Like it's
Does anyone know like who he is, or is it just like an anonymous
bro,
account?
all I know is his account has gotten shut down like a couple times. And he'll always make jokes that like Schefter and like Rappaport are trying to get him shut down. But I don't know. He has to be connected somehow because he has the scoop on shit. But anyway, with that being said, Devontae Adams, very likely, in my opinion, to at least be attempted to be traded for at the trade deadline. So yeah, it'll be very interesting. But overall, narrative talk here. The Jets roster, while it is improved and while they do have a great defense, Aaron Rodgers has to be the guy to get them over the top this year. Because if it's not coming from Aaron Rodgers, where is it coming from? Because we saw what the Jets can be. We've seen what the Jets can be with bad quarterback play and a great defense. So even if you put Tyrod and get average quarterback play, we know that they are not going to be real Super Bowl contenders. So, do you think Aaron Rodgers would be enough to get them to the Super Bowl?
See, and here's where it gets interesting, right? I just want to. This is how I'm looking at it, right? And again, you know, I don't want it to be this to come off negative. I would just want to come off extremely realistic. I don't think there's enough people asking themselves, myself included, right? Because whenever we talk about the Jets, it's like, they're for sure Super Bowl contender locks, right? But and I say that, but the more I think of it, the more things I consider, like, with quarterbacks, you can see that difference of the arm strength a lot sometimes in just like 1-2 off seasons, right? Like, bang, it just kind of something they lose it as they're getting older. So we realistically really haven't seen Aaron Rodgers so almost at this point it's like a year and a half, 2 years. So what I think is interesting about that too is not only is the damage right to the leg, to the ankle, all that. It's more than anything. It's just that on top of the residual just getting older. How much is Aaron Rodgers still going to look like vintage MVP Aaron Rodgers? Because I know this wasn't a long time ago, but I still do think it's something worth considering. Where you hear everyone talk about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. It's like, yeah, well, it's Aaron Rodgers. It's like, yes, it is, but this is an old version of Aaron Rodgers. Is he still going to have that same juice? That is very much to be determined.
I mean, I guess you could make the argument that like he was still like pretty good in Green Bay, like when he only had like Adams or like towards the last, like he was still pretty good outside of the year that he tore his Achilles. So yes, I understand what you're saying, and I'm leaning. I agree with you. I agree with you that it is a lot more of a wild card than I think people are expecting because I don't know, man. I don't know. I think, and we'll talk about this with other teams too. I think a big one that we could talk about, and we will when we get to the division, is the Falcons, where Kirk Cousins, like, this is an older guy who tore his Achilles. Like, we do not know if he is going to be back full strength, but I think I would be willing to put more money on the Jets than I would the Falcons going into this year. But
no, absolutely.
I mean, I think Aaron Rodgers can get them over the top. I think because the Jets haven't even got to the playoffs, it's like, I don't know. Like, I can't. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to bet that they're going to go to the Super Bowl, but I could see them being one of the contenders.
No, absolutely. Like all I was going to say is, like, don't get me wrong though, Jets fans, I want to be clear. You guys have an amazing roster. It's complete for the most part, really minus the receiving core at this point from top to bottom. I mean, it is a truly like thought out, well put together roster. But now it's a matter of, can Aaron Rodgers be that same guy and can he stay healthy? That's really all it is this season, Jets fans. So now it's to be determined.
Any final thoughts on the AFC East, Dobbs?
Final thoughts is that there's definitely a lot of narratives in the AFC East, and I can't wait to see how they shape out this year.
100%. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been team previews for the AFC East. As always, if you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, let us know in the comments what narrative you think will be true and what narrative you think is false, or just come up with your own narratives in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great rest of your night.